My name is Charmaine Vega, also known as Mama Vega. This class is brought to you by LA Care and Blue Shield Promise Resource Centers. The centers are a place for you to stay active, healthy, and informed. We hope you enjoy this virtual class. Today's class is on the importance of eating patterns, how they can impact your health, when did they get started, and if you can possibly change them so that you can change your overall health. I hope you enjoy the presentation that's been put together for you. Let's get started. The overview of what the class is about. How are eating patterns developed? When are they developed? What are eating patterns? What do we mean when we say eating patterns? What is it that we're really talking about? Why is it important for us to know what our eating patterns are? How are they developed? When might it be important for us to change our eating patterns? Why should we change them? Is it necessary to change them at all? So we will discuss that for you to be able to come to that conclusion on your own. Based on your own eating patterns, you'll be able to figure that out. So first, let's look at how are eating patterns developed? Now remember, eating patterns and what you eat also pertains to your overall nutrition. Are you healthy? Are you feeling aches, pains, whatever? That all has something to do with what you are eating and how your body is absorbing the nutrients. So usually eating patterns are developed like most other patterns. It's through repetition. You keep doing something over and over and over again, and then it develops a pattern. That pattern, once you do it, it becomes a habit. It's kind of like you get up in the morning on the same side of the bed, you go brush your teeth, you make up your bed. You do those type of things. That becomes a pattern, which is also your habit. And if somebody throws it off or they do something different, you feel like, oh, I don't know what to do. How am I going to do this? When these patterns develop over a long period of time, they become hard to break because you've done it repeatedly. It's kind of like you know exactly where you put your keys and you know exactly where you put your shoes. And then if somebody throws it off, you don't know what to do. But if you do it routinely every single day, you feel comfortable. So it becomes a comfort zone. Some of the things that you do that becomes a pattern is you may say, okay, well, I'm going to eat my food before I do this, or I'm going to fast, or I'm going to eat 3 meals a day versus 2 meals a day, or I'm going to eat 1 meal a day. All of those become a pattern. You make a decision to do something, and when you consistently do it time and time and time again, that becomes your pattern. That is what your pattern is. So we're going to discuss how that impacts everything else. Okay, when are these patterns developed? You're probably going to be surprised to know that it's very early in life. Eating patterns are developed in early childhood. Actually, they've done studies, and the studies show that your eating patterns are developed by the time you're 12 months old or 24 months old. So what does that tell you? That tells you whatever it is that you're eating during those formative toddlers and pre-toddlers, because at 12 months, you may not be walking yet. So if you're not walking, someone else is feeding you. So whatever you are being fed is now what's helping to develop that pattern, whatever that eating pattern is going to be. Maybe you say, you're getting fed at nighttime. So now as you get older, you want to always eat at night. You want to make sure, I've got to have something at night. That becomes a pattern. Or you want to always get up at 6 o'clock in the morning in order to do something. That becomes your other pattern. Whatever that is, that becomes your eating habit. Eating patterns are directly related to your health as well. Because if you eat too much of something, you can gain weight. Eat too little, you can lose weight. So these patterns have a direct influence on your overall health, nutrition, well-being, everything. It has a direct impact on all of that. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're making sure that it's having a positive effect. But not only on you, if you're feeding your family or you're feeding your kids, you want to make sure that whatever patterns you guys are developing, it's going to be a positive pattern where it has a positive effect on your overall health. Here are some other influences that you may not think about. Education. Education. Oftentimes people attribute the more education you have, and education doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to a formal school. Education can be something that you learned from your mother, your father, or the school of hard knocks. People will say, I learned this in the school of hard knocks. You learn by doing something. Ethnicity, that has an influence on your eating patterns. Certain cultures, if you're in Europe or somewhere, that's going to have a different type of eating pattern than it would be as if you're in South America or if you're here in the United States. Some countries, you take a 2-hour lunch and you take a nap during that time, and that becomes a pattern of what you're doing. So the ethnicity or where you come from or what your grandmother did or your grandfather did, that has something to do with it. Economic status. Sometimes your eating pattern is developed in a particular way because that's what you can get. Those are all the foods that you can get, and that's what you had to eat, which became a part of your pattern of eating because those were the foods available to you. So your pattern is developed by that. Maybe it has to do with your values, the foods you value. Maybe you value more healthy foods. Maybe you live on the farm where you can graze and you can go out to the garden and get certain things. And even if you're eating meat, no matter whether you are a meat eater or you're plant-based or vegan or any of the other categories that we can put people in, you develop a pattern, which is now your habit. But these are all these things that are all the way around, from education, ethnicity, food availability, which some people say, well, I can't get healthy food. That becomes a part of your pattern because maybe you can't get the fresh produce at a farmer's market. So what you do is you end up going and you buy your vegetables either frozen or in the can. That becomes a part of your pattern. So as you get older, that's what you're eating. It may be that's what was given to you. Maybe you don't do that, or you eat TV dinners, or you do fast food. That becomes your pattern. Those foods that go into your body, they nourish your body in whatever capacity they can, and your body will absorb them in whichever way your body deems it's best for your body, positive or negative. That's what's going to happen, and that pattern is what is going to determine your overall health. Again, it's very important to look at what is your pattern and decide if that pattern is beneficial to you or if it's not beneficial to you. Those things become important, okay? The next slide, okay? Can your pattern of eating be altered? That means, can it be changed in any way at all? What do you think? If you can change one thing over here, if you can change your pattern or change your habit, or you decide, I'm not going to do that anymore. I think this is what I want to do. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to make a conscious decision that I'm going to do this. So that means you can change that. So if you can change your behavior, if you can change your behavior, can you change your eating pattern? Remember, this was established with you when you were between 12 and 24 months. So we've just shown you that. We've also shown you that it has an impact or influence on all of your behavior. All of your behavior has an influence on your overall livelihood, your nutrition, that type of thing. So we know that patterns and habits are behaviors. So if patterns and habits are overall behaviors, and you decide you want to change a behavior, can you change the pattern? The answer is yes, you can. Now, how can you change that? How do you think you can change that? Well, we might find that it is important to change our pattern. If we are female, we want to change it when we become pregnant. Why? Because we know that I might have been eating all of these snacks and things that I deemed was probably not necessarily as healthy as I wanted to do. Or maybe I was drinking alcohol. And we know that once you become pregnant, you don't want to drink the alcohol because now you're feeding that to the baby, and the baby could have the fetal alcohol syndrome. Maybe we want to say that I don't want to eat Doritos anymore or something else, and I want to eat more vegetables, or I want to eat more of the foods that have the omega-3s, which is going to help the baby develop the brain, or any of those things. Or we want to eat more protein because we weren't eating as much protein as we thought that we needed, because we want to look at who are we feeding now? We have another body that we're feeding that's inside of us, so that whatever we're taking in, we have to make sure that that other body is getting nutrients too. Not just us, but we have to think about someone else. That's the same thing we want to do as far as thinking about someone else when we are feeding our young children or a young relative. It doesn't have to be our children. It could be nieces, nephews, or other children. Or it can just be, I'm a daycare provider and I'm taking care of small children. I want to make sure that I'm giving them balanced food for their overall optimum growth and their habits. Why? Because we also know that between the ages of 12 to 24 months, we have a huge impact on that pattern. So it's important for us to maybe change our pattern when we're dealing with children at that age. Why? Because also between that age is when they mimic our behaviors. So if we want to make sure that the child is eating the proper thing, we have to be eating the proper food for ourselves so that they can mimic that same behavior. So it's not just looking at when I'm pregnant, eating the right food. I want to look at when I have that child, that child is also going to be eating the right food that they should have, because they're going to want to eat the same thing that I'm eating. You know that when you have little kids and they see you eating, what's the first thing they want? They want whatever it is you have, good, bad, or indifferent. They want to have what it is that you have. So you want to make sure that what you are eating and you're providing the right nutrients for yourself, you're also providing the right role model. You want to be that role model for these other children who's going to watch what you're doing. Not only the little ones, but the preschoolers. Why? Because if they're in preschool, they may not be with you all day. And if they have allergies or something like that, you want to make sure that they have the right food that they're going to be taking with them to school so that they can eat properly. Some preschools will provide the information, not just the information, but they will provide information on what they're providing the children, and you can decide if you feel that that fits with your eating pattern of what you want your child to be eating. If it's not, then you give suggestions or you send to the school what that would be that they were taking with them. When you have an elementary child, the schools provide the meals, to most kids, these days they're providing the meals to them. But if for some reason you feel that your child cannot have those foods because it's not what your child is accustomed to eating, you let the school know. The school can then say, okay, we can provide this or we cannot. And then if not, then you can do what some of us did, is you send a sack lunch with the kids so the kid can take their own lunch to school. If it's not in a sack, they can take a little lunch pail with them, and you send the foods that you know is going to be what you feel that they need to have that's healthy to be provided in their lunch. So we want to make sure that when we're developing these patterns when they are little, like we said, by the time they're 12 months, which means you have to start earlier than 12 months because it's already developed between 12 to 24 months. So if it's developed between 12 and 24 months, you would have already started, because if it's developed by 12 months, that means it's everything that I've been giving them up to 12 months is what is determining that pattern. And if it comes later, fine. But let's look at trying to do it before then. And if we keep it going after 12 to 24 months, we want to make sure that we're still doing the same thing. Because remember, when we become that adult, that's what determines what we're eating as an adult. And it becomes the longer you do something, the harder it becomes for us to change that pattern. We become in a rut. And we go, well, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to eat that. I don't like the way that tastes. Usually the reason someone is saying they don't like the way something tastes, it could be because they have an allergy, they have a sensitivity, or they've never been exposed to something. And if you haven't been exposed to something, usually you haven't developed that taste to it. You haven't developed that pattern. You haven't developed the palate. And you'll go, oh, I don't like this because it's foreign to you. It's something that you really are not accustomed to. So you want to make sure you do that. You may also want to change your eating pattern. Usually these days, people are changing their eating patterns because they have been diagnosed with diabetes. And that's a life-threatening situation. So once you develop something that's either a chronic illness, a disease, or a dietary issue, now you're forced to have to change your pattern. So what we want to try to do is get you to understand the proper way of eating, what you should be eating, so that you don't get to a point where now you have some type of ailment that you need to try to get rid of through food and dietary. You have to change it, and it's like drastic now. But remember, it's not only adults who are having diabetes. You're having children having diabetes, which at a very young age, which is showing that even younger, many of them may be eating the wrong foods. Not everyone who has diabetes, it's due to that they're not eating the right foods. We understand that, and we know that that's not the case. But if we start seeing people gaining weight and all those things, we have to change our eating pattern. We not only have to change our eating pattern, but we may have to change our exercise pattern, because we can be eating the right foods, but we're not burning off the calories and the food that we're taking in. So if we're not burning it off, then that means we're just going to keep gaining weight. So whatever food we take in, we have to be able to burn off those calories. It's like calories in, calories out. We have to burn the calories. It's kind of like your car engine. And if you keep putting gas in it and you only burn a little, and you put more gas in and you only burn a little, that gas tank is always going to be full. You're not going to get down to empty. So we want us to get down to where we've burned all the calories that we took in, just like a car. We don't want a car to get on empty, but we do want us to get on empty. So we want to burn those calories as much as possible. We want to also look at foods that we're giving children that are developing their eating habits and breathing habits and asthma and things of that nature, so that they can have good lungs. So we want to look at foods that they're taking in that's going to be good for the lungs, that's going to not have the allergies. A lot of people now are the celiac disease, which means, the gluten intolerance, and gluten is what we have in breads. So they can still eat breads, but they may have to eat breads that are now gluten-free. So some of the corns, we may want to go that route, or some of the rice breads. So there's different alternatives that we can use. And in some other cases, we will be talking about some of the alternatives that we can have in substitutions for foods. And we can say that a person may not want to have the gluten. What do we do in that case? Or they can't eat bread. So some of the places you see now, if a person is eating, for example, a burger, they can say, well, I don't want the bread, but I want it wrapped in a lettuce leaf. Those are the kind of things, too, that we look at breaking a pattern. That's a part of breaking a pattern, because it may be you're used to having that hamburger that has the bread and the lettuce and the tomatoes and everything else on it, but you were still gaining weight. So maybe you can still have that same burger, but you have to wrap it in lettuce, because now you've just reduced the calories that you're taking in. That breaks a pattern of something that you were not used to. Maybe you were used to always having a creamy salad dressing on your salad. Maybe instead of that, we do a vinaigrette salad dressing. Again, you've reduced the calories, you still have the salad, but now you've changed the dressing. So any change that you make is going to be breaking that pattern. Maybe you would always eat a lot of food at 8 o'clock at night. And instead of eating a lot of food at 8 o'clock at night, you eat now at 5 o'clock, or you put your heavy meal at, say, noon, which would be around the lunchtime, and then you go and you do whatever you need to do during the day, so that you're burning off some of those calories that you took in. And then later on, around 6 o'clock, you now have something different. All of those little changes are where you change your eating pattern. And when you change your eating pattern, you also change how your body is digesting your food to make your body more efficient in being able to digest the food, so the cells in your body can absorb all the nutrients that it needs to take in. Those are some of the things that you can do that's going to help you to get better nutrition, better overall health, and have a potential to have less chances of having some type of disease. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and we look forward to seeing you virtually again next week, and at one of our resource centers as soon as we can. Until then, stay active, healthy, and informed. And like Mama Vega always says, Now chew on this. Okay, that's the end of this particular presentation, and I look forward to seeing you at our next presentation.